Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited that you're here and excited to learn about raw feeding for your pets. Today, I'm going to be talking about safely switching to raw feeding for your pets, and it's a veterinarian's guide to ensuring a healthy transition. So what you're going to learn in this presentation are the benefits of feeding a raw food diet, different approaches to transitioning to a raw diet, how to transition those picky cats. I have a few of those that I've gone through this process, and other picky eaters, because dogs can be picky too, mistakes that you want to avoid, and then of course, food safety and potential risks that can come with feeding a raw food diet. If you're not sure who I am, I'm Dr. Katie Woodley. I'm the proud owner and founder of The Natural Pet Doctor. I'm an integrative holistic veterinarian who's trained in acupuncture, Chinese herbal medicine, and food therapy. And we offer online group training programs to pet parents across the world. But essentially, my mission is to make sure that you, as the amazing pet parent that you are, feel empowered and supported and confident and being able to implement these holistic modalities into your pets' lives to help them live a long and vibrant life. So let's start with some of the benefits of a raw food diet. Now, a raw food diet is the least processed type of food, and it can actually be the healthiest form of food. When we think about a raw food diet, we know that it contains natural vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and what can happen is those can degrade when you cook them. And highly processed pet foods, so things like kibble, are cooked at really high heat temperatures several times, and that can result in the loss of vital nutrients. And then we have to add those vital nutrients back into the food in synthetic form. And so raw food also contains natural enzymes, which help with digestion and your pet's absorbing those vitamins and minerals. Now, in terms of food also, so raw food diets and your species appropriate diets for dogs and cats, they actually have no biological need for carbohydrates. So why is a raw food diet better than a processed food diet? Now, when we have to bind like the dry food together, the way that kibble is processed, we have to use filler ingredients, and those foods are going to be over usually about 60% carbohydrates. So if we think about our dogs and especially our cats who are obligate carnivores, they don't have a need for carbohydrates. So what do those carbohydrates do then is that they can turn into sugars. So that's one of the reasons why a least processed food diet, like a raw food diet, it's a higher protein diet. It's built more to meet the needs of your pets. Now, one of the nice bonuses with a raw food diet is that you tend to see smaller stools from your dogs and your cats. So this can be a little bit scary at first, but it's completely normal as long as they're not straining, there's no blood, they're not constipated. And it's because there's less things to process. There's less fillers. They're absorbing more of those nutrients. A lot of times these raw food diets are going to be a little bit less fiber content also, which can add bulk to the stool. And raw food diets, a lot of the studies are showing that our animals have better gut health. They have a better microbiome when they're on these types of foods. We also see behavioral benefits also. So a lot of pets can be anxious. I don't know if anyone here has an anxious dog or even a cranky cat. When we switch them over to a raw food diet and they're absorbing those nutrients, those vitamins, those minerals, they're breaking down their food, we know because of that gut-brain axis, that connection with the brain from the gut through the vagus nerve, that the raw food diet is decreasing the amount of inflammation. It's supporting a better gut health, a better microbiome. And because of less inflammation, we have better brain health, which translates over to better behaviors, which are fantastic. No one wants an anxious pet. We also see better dental health, especially when we're introducing these raw meaty bones and we're getting that they're crunching and chewing and that grinding on those bones to help manipulate the gums and break down the tartar and the plaque. And we also see less allergies, a healthier coat and skin with a raw food diet because there's less fillers, there's less processing that they have to do, there's decreased carbohydrates that can turn into sugar and feed yeast. So these are a few of the benefits of a raw food diet. So if you're looking at transitioning, I hope that kind of helps you get onto this side of, okay, let's give it a go and see how we can do it. Now, there's quite a few different ways that we can transition. So if you're on a kibble diet, or if you're even feeding a canned food diet, or even if you're feeding like a cooked diet, whether it's pre-made or it's homemade, there's a couple different techniques And I'm going to break down some of these for you. And the big thing here, when you hear these different methods and techniques, is to choose the one that feels the best for you. We're going to talk about what that looks like and how that can feel, so that way it can help guide you a little bit too. But the two main techniques we're going to talk about are the rapid switch technique and the slow switch technique. Now, keep in mind when you're transitioning your pets, and this is more so for your dogs, for feeding sparingly in those initial days before you start the transition. So we don't want to feed no more than 2/3 of the calculated daily requirement, and you can divide that into those several small meals spread throughout the day. This is not necessary for cats. We don't want to fast cats, but it can help with having less stuff in the gut. We do this intermittent fasting also that can help with that transition, decrease the risk of gastrointestinal side effects like diarrhea and vomiting. But many pets do really well with the transition period. But if you have a larger dog, a larger breed dog, or individuals that tend to eat quickly and excessively, you definitely want to feed them less and calculate out, okay, about 2/3, it doesn't have to be exact, but a little bit less food. You can even fast them for the 24 hours prior to the day of this transition that you start. Now, for both dogs and cats, we want to be monitoring, and these are some of the adjustments. So when we're monitoring them, this is where it's not black or white. You can make decisions to tweak and adjust and change things based on how your pet is doing. So we want to closely monitor them. This is where getting a journal can be very helpful. And then also to observing their digestion. Are we hearing gurgling noises, rumbling? Are they really gassy? What does the stool quality look like? Is it staying firm? Is it getting softer? Are they having diarrhea? What is their overall well-being? Do they have good energy levels? Are we noticing more lethargy? Are they sleeping more? These are all things you want to keep note of in a journal, so that way you can make those adjustments. So you're going to make adjustments based on portion sizes and the amount of feeding, like the feeding frequency, based on your pet's individual needs. Now let's start with the rapid switch technique. So as I mentioned previously, this was developed by Dr. Ian Billinghurst, and it involves transitioning pets to a raw diet very quickly. So more quickly than the gradual method. And this can be a very effective approach for the majority of pets. Majority of pets can go through this transition pretty quickly, but some pets are going to require a gradual transition to avoid GI upset or additional stress. So those pets are going to be ones that are older. They may have pre-existing digestive problems. So pets who have like inflammatory bowel disease or have impaired immune systems. This may not be the technique that you want to use if one of your pets falls into those any one of those categories. Now let's talk about the steps of the rapid switch technique. So we're going to start with preparation, right? It's always good to be prepared when we start something. So we want to start gathering all the necessary ingredients for a balanced raw diet. Okay, that might be a pre-made raw diet. That's okay. That's what we use for our cats in my household. But if you're going to do a homemade diet, you want to make sure you have all the meat and the bones and the organs and all this. If you're adding supplements to balance it, like the vitamin E and your omega-3s, have all of that ready. So you're ready to start on day one. You're going to do that initial fast. So remember that beginning phase, even before we get to this first part, is that you're decreasing the amount of food for a couple days prior to starting the rapid switch technique. So this now day one, you're going to start transitioning by fasting them. So this is typically a 24-hour fast. You can use bone broth. I recommend, especially if you're thinking, oh my gosh, Dr. Katie, my pet's going to go crazy. They're going to be hounding me. They're going to be so upset they're not getting fed. What you can do is you can freeze some of those bone broths and you can give them ice cubes throughout the day. So it's like they're getting something, but you're still technically fasting them for the 24 hours. Now for cats, of course, you can skip this. You want to skip this step. We don't want to fast cats, but fasting is going to help cleanse the digestive system and prepare it for the new diet. And then what we're going to do after that 24-hour fast is we're going to introduce the raw food. So you're going to start by offering your pet a meal consisting of raw meat, bones, and organs. So that balanced raw food diet. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. 80-10-10s or your PMRs or your BARF diets. There's a lot of great resources at the end of this webinar too that I have for you that you can look up and follow those types of diets. This is just to get you started and give you a framework for safely switching your pets to a raw food diet. And then, of course, observation. We need to be monitoring our dogs and our cats. We want to be watching for signs of digestive upset or discomfort. And then what we'll do is we do the full transition. So you're going to gradually increase the amount of raw food in your pet's diet while eliminating the previous food. Now, the rapid switch technique, you could do 100% switch right away. If you wanted to do it over 2 to 3 days, no problem. That's okay. Do what you feel comfortable with and what your intuition is telling you for your pets. You know them the best, and it's okay if you want to go slow. If you want to start with 50% or doing a meal, I'm going to talk about some of the slow switch techniques that are a little bit longer than just a couple days. But if you wanted to do a meal here and there, great, that's okay to do. There is not necessarily a wrong way to do this. I want to reiterate that. There is not a wrong way to do this. The biggest thing is knowing your pets. Do they have a predisposition to digestive upset? If they do, great, go slower with the transition. Now, let's talk about the slow switch technique. So once again, this is developed by Dr. Ian Billinghurst, and this method involves a more gradual transition to a raw diet. This is going to be beneficial for certain pets. So especially those with digestive sensitivities or older animals. And it's going to allow the digestive system to gradually adjust to the new diet, reducing the chances of GI upset. So vomiting, diarrhea, they don't feel good, they have grumbly belly, they're really gassy. So if you have one of those pets and you know they're sensitive, this technique is what you want to follow. And some of the steps that we're looking at are going to look at week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. So you can see this is going to be a much longer process than your your rapid technique. So week 1, we start by replacing a small portion, so roughly 25%, so a quarter of your pet's current diet, with a balanced raw meal. Week 2, we're increasing that proportion of the raw food diet to 50% of the diet, and we're going to gradually reduce the amount of their previous diet accordingly. 50% new, 50% old. And then week 3, we go 75% raw food, 25% previous diet. Week 4, this is where we should be consuming primarily the raw food diet 100%. And if you need to feed a little bit, you can feed a little bit of the small portion of the previous diet. This technique I follow the most with a lot of my patients, but that's because I'm working with a lot of patients that have gut health issues. I use the rapid technique for my cats and my other pets that I've had that I've switched to a raw food diet when I know that their GI system is strong and there's less chance of GI upset occurring. Keep in mind each phase, so each week, I say each day, keep that journal handy because you're going to want to assess their overall health and well-being during each one of these phases. Now, with the slow switch technique, there are a couple different methods. We're going to briefly touch on the method 1, which is alternating meals, method 2, which is the mixed feeding, method 3, which is blending the foods, and method 4, cook to raw transition. Now, I don't want this to overwhelm you. I want you to go through these and think about, okay, what works the best for me? What is my intuition telling me is the right path moving forward for my dog, my cat, or both? So method 1 is going to be alternating those meals. So we're going to offer 1 meal of the balanced raw food or raw diet, followed by 1 meal of your pet's old food. So say the morning meal is raw, the evening meal is kibble, or the evening meal is a pre-made cooked food or a canned food. So your old food, 1 meal, the raw food, the next, and then keep on going. And you're going to gradually decrease the number of meals with the old food and increase the meals with the raw over the next 7 to 14 days. So we're gradually transitioning over the 2 weeks. We're decreasing the amount of the old food. And if your pet usually accepts this method without any issues, so what that means is no GI upset, they feel good, there's no lethargy, that usually means they have a robust digestive system, which is great. So if you're noticing they're doing fantastic, you're not seeing any signs, you could always speed that up and have that 100% transition done by 7 days. So, keeping an eye on them, knowing your individual pet, watching them, making sure their stools are nice and normal, and you can speed up the transition. Remember, none of these methods are set in stone. They're going to be based on your individual pet. Now, method 2 is mixed feeding. So this is where we offer both types of food simultaneously. So this is where you'll see people like mixing kibble and putting a chicken wing on the top of the same bowl. Now, there may cause some digestive upset just because of different types of food, especially if your pet has a sensitive stomach and breaking down those foods. But a lot of people do this and it can work just fine. So you can always give this a try if this feels more comfortable to you through that transition. It is still a safe way to transition your pet to a raw food diet. So the way it works is you're going to gradually decrease the proportion of old food and increase the amount of new food. So once again, you'll see similar themes here. Give 20% of the new food for a few days, 50% for a few days, 75% for a few days of the new food, and then transition to 100% of the new food. So you're decreasing the old food proportionally to the amount of raw food that you're increasing by. Now, method 3 is where we blend the foods together. So this is where we can physically break down the old and new food and put them into like this homogeneous mixture. So this is where you can like add water to like kibble, you can blend it in a smoothie, and you want to start with small amounts of the new food and gradually decrease the proportion of the old food. Once again, just like every method that we're talking about here. And this is very helpful when you have a picky pet. So whether it's a dog, whether it's a cat, cats tend to be notorious for being picky, especially with transitioning to raw food if they're kibble addicted. They're very sensitive to textures and smells and all of that. So if you mix it all together and you start putting the raw in and they get used to a new texture, that can work really, really well. So if you have a pet that's really reluctant to try the new food, give this a try. It can be a little bit harder, it's a little bit more manual mixing everything together, but it can work really well for those picky pets. And then method 4 of this slow transition technique is the cook to raw transition. And this is something where, especially for sensitive pets, or if there's fear around, I've been feeding this cooked food diet for a long time and my pet's been doing okay, I don't know what to do, this would be the method I would recommend. So you want to initially introduce the new food in a cooked state. So there's a lot of pre-made raw food companies out there now where you can lightly cook it, you lightly sear it, and it's okay to do that. You want to double check with your raw food company if you're using a pre-made raw, if that's okay to do because of the bone content. And then if you're doing a homemade where you're putting together your raw food diets based on, proportions, 80-10-10 ratios, PMRs, your barf diets, you can always do that lightly cooked and then gradually transition to a more raw state. So once again, you can do this over a couple weeks, you can do this over a week, see how your pet does. Once again, this can be really helpful for very picky pets and helpful for cats. Cats are cats, and you're going to have to play around with different textures, different temperatures, all those things to see what they like. And also too, for older pets, I find sometimes older pets especially do better with cooked diets because it's more energetically warm. A lot of times from a Chinese medicine food therapy perspective, not every pet does well with a raw food diet. So I want to reiterate that. I know we're talking about a lot of raw food with the summit, and I'm talking about transitioning to a raw food and just talked about the benefits of the raw food. But I want to say not every pet does well with a raw food diet. And if you find that your pet is just not adjusting to the raw food diet because you're monitoring them with a journal, it is 100% okay to feed a cooked food diet if you need to. So please, walk away with that knowing that you're still feeding a less processed food diet and your pet is doing well with what you're feeding them. Now, remember, once again, every pet is unique and their response to each method may vary. So you want to monitor your pet's acceptance, their digestion, their overall well-being during the transition process. The best way to do this, I promise you, is to get a journal and write it down every single day, because I know for myself personally, I'm like, I'll remember that. And I'm like, okay, I remember, one of my cats' Moki stool, and then I'll remember Kiwi stool. And then the next day I'm like, wait, was that Moki's or Kiwi stool? So it can be hard to remember that, especially if you have multiple pets in your household that you're trying to monitor and adjust their diets. So definitely get that journal. It can be a game changer for monitoring and measuring. And then by trying these different approaches, I always say, go through this information and sit down and think about what resonates the most with you and start there. If it's not working or your pet's not like responding to it, or they're just not taking to that diet, try a different approach. So that way you can find the most suitable method for a safe and successful switch to the raw food. Now let's talk about cats, because cats can be one of the hardest animals to transition to a new food, especially if it's a raw food diet. So this is where a gradual introduction. So if you have a cat And I went through this process with my senior kitty, Kiwi, when we transitioned her from a kibble diet when we first rescued her. And she was kibble addicted. She had been on kibble for like 10 years of her life, but I knew I wanted to transition her to a raw food diet. This is where you have to be in it for the long game. So gradual introduction. You want to start by introducing a small amount of the raw food alongside their current diet. So, and then gradually increase the proportion of raw food while decreasing the amount of their previous diet. This is where offering different textures. Cats are very particular with the texture of the food. So you need to experiment with different types of textures, such as ground, minced, chunked meat. Every cat will be different with what they prefer. My 3 cats are all very different with what they prefer. And sometimes they prefer different things on different days. So I carry a lot of different varieties of food so that I can rotate it and have variety for them, which is really important also. And then looking at mixing in their favorite flavors. So tuna juice can be a game changer. Even meat baby food, mixing that in can help tremendously with getting your cat to start eating the raw food diet, canned sardine juice, or even using like their favorite treats. I love the freeze-dried single ingredients like chicken, the freeze-dried chicken where I can crumble it over the top of the raw food, even using freeze-dried balanced diets where you're supposed to add moisture. I will crumble that on the top of the food using freeze-dried liver, sprinkling that on top. Bonita flakes can be really helpful. So using those toppers can be the game changer to helping your cats. The other thing too is what you can do is you can actually use some of the freeze-dried food and put it down dry and then start adding moisture to it. So it's going to mimic kibble, but it's going to be much better quality than kibble to help them get used to that difference in texture, get them better nutrition, start adapting their gut microbiome to a higher protein, lower carb diet, and you'll start seeing those changes in their stool. Also warming the food can help. So warming it to room temperature. We use like water baths to bring a raw food temperature or raw food out of the fridge to room temperature. You might have to play around. Some cats prefer cold, but a lot of cats want a warmer temperature for their food. Think about, what they would do in the wild, right? It's like they catch a mouse and that mouse is warm. We want to bring it to mouse temperature. And then adding moisture. So adding water, adding kefir, low sodium broth, make sure there's no onion powder in that if you're using human brands. So adding that to the raw food to add moisture to it. I noticed that my senior cat Kiwi, she's my one that is the most picky. I need to add water to her food, whether it's different types of food, whether it's the raw, whether it's a canned. She likes a slurry, whereas my Moki cat, who has cerebellar hypoplasia, so he doesn't eat normal like a normal cat because he's kind of twitchy and jumpy and, his head bobs up and down when he's eating and he's focusing because of his condition. He does not do well with slurries. He needs like the chunks or, it's more of a firm texture for his food. That works the best for him. Then once again, I mentioned using food toppers. So those freeze-dried, dehydrated food toppers. Also, a lot of cats respond really well to nutritional yeast. It has a cheese flavor to it, and it provides also B vitamins, which is perfect. B vitamins are a great appetite stimulant for cats. And then offering frequent but smaller meals. Cats' stomachs are little. They can only hold about a ping pong ball size in their stomach. Little tiny amounts of food are what they do best with. So don't worry though, if you can't, if you don't work from home or you're not around all the time, do your best with what you can. And then of course, patience and persistence. Cats can be stubborn. Cats are cats. That's why they're such beautiful individuals, but you have to be persistent and you have to have patience. Our Kiwi cat took 6 months for us to transition her over to a more species appropriate diet. So just that patience, that persistence, blessing the food, having faith that you'll eventually get there are a lot of the tools I have used personally for myself in my own household and that I use with clients every single day to help get those picky cats over to a raw food diet. Some other tips too, especially for dogs, once again, food temperature, reiterating that, experiment with those different temperatures. I've had Arctic breeds like your Huskies, your Malamutes that have refused to eat food if it was not frozen. So I was like, okay, well, they obviously, they come from those really cold climates, and that's part of food therapy. So experimenting with those different temperatures is important. The food presentation. So cats can be visually stimulated by the appearance of the food. So using puzzle feeders, hiding small pieces for them to find, turning it into a game, using that prey model, thinking about what is it like, especially with cats, what do they do when they eat? It isn't like they just walk up and find a meal sitting on the ground. They love the hunt. They love catching. They love that play. And then at the end of that hunt, they get the prey, right? And that's their reward. So we can stimulate that with like playing with a feather toy. Before that, we can take freeze-dried raw pieces and we can throw it across the floor and have them chase it and then feed them afterwards. So they're essentially going through those steps they would normally go through if they were outside on their own, trying to get their own food, to engage with them and help stimulate their appetite. We also want to rotate proteins. So rotating with different proteins will keep those flavors interesting, and that can be done daily, especially if your pets have strong GI tracts. And then, of course, using those toppers can be a game changer for a lot of pets. Now, the big thing here and the big concern with so many people and a lot of my colleagues and other veterinarians is the food safety. And it's a real thing. We know that there can be foodborne pathogens that are a part of a raw food diet. Now, here's the thing I always say is that think about what do you do when you're handling raw food for yourself is you are following food safety procedures, right? So ensuring food safety during raw feeding is of utmost importance to keep everyone safe. Now, keep in mind, your dogs and cats are built for a raw food diet. They're built to shear and rip apart and chew that muscle, break down bones, that short transit time. They can handle foodborne pathogens, unlike us. We are omnivores and we have a longer digestive transit process, and we are at risk of having foodborne pathogens and getting illness from that. So proper handling, storage, preparation techniques, washing things, your hands, washing surfaces, washing the bowls afterwards are essential to prevent contamination and minimize risk of foodborne illnesses. Now, here's the thing. There are numerous studies and surveys that show the risk of you getting sick from feeding a raw food diet to your pets is very minimal. That is great to know. And there's studies and a lot of surveys that have been done that showcase this. So I don't want you to be scared. There's a lot of fear mongering around this. But if you practice the same food safety techniques that you would use for your own self when you're preparing meat and handling things and washing dishes, you should be fine. Now, also to keep in mind, sourcing high quality ingredients from reputable suppliers is key also to providing safe raw food. Pet food companies, especially raw pet food companies, are watched like hawks by the FDA. And if there's any foodborne pathogen present in that final product, they will be shut down. They will get recalled. So you want to use suppliers that are following certain testing procedures. There's a lot of great resources out there. If you have any questions on that, feel free to send us a message at the Natural Pet Doctor so I can help guide you to some of the resources that we follow and brands that we use to make sure that you're keeping your pets and yourself as safe as possible. Now, these are some of the common mistakes that I want you to avoid that a lot of people make. But once you know about them, they're much easier to avoid. Number one, insufficient research. So the lack of understanding about nutritional requirements of pets on a raw diet can lead to imbalances or deficiencies. Now, this presentation is not about that, but it is about feeding raw food safe. So I still see it's not just about foodborne pathogens, it's about keeping our pets healthy and safe. So make sure that you're doing your research to make sure that we are using the right companies if you're using pre-made, or you're balancing those diets if you're going all in and you're creating your own diets for your pets. There's a lot of great resources. And once again, I have quite a few at the end of this presentation to help guide you and get you started. Then another mistake is inadequate variety. Now, offering a limited range of proteins and neglecting variety can lead to nutritional deficiencies over time. We want to really aim to include a diverse range of proteins. So things like chicken, beef, turkey, rabbit, bison, lamb, fish. There's so many wonderful proteins that we can add in for both our dogs and cats. Also, an incorrect bone to meat ratio. This is where a lot of times things can go wrong because a lot of pet parents don't add bone in, especially if they're making their own raw food diets. And if we have this improper ratio of bone to meat, that can lead to digestive issues. If we have too much bone, it can lead to constipation. Not enough, it can lead to diarrhea. And long term, it can lead to bone issues. So we want to make sure that we're following appropriate guidelines to ensure a balanced bone to meat ratio for your pets. Also, skipping supplements. So if we're not adding in things like omega-3s or vitamin E, or if there's not enough manganese because we're not adding in fur or the proper foods that are going to contain enough manganese to balance that long term. So make sure you're, once again, doing your research to make sure we're not missing something. Ignoring safe handling practices. So improper handling of the raw meat, those can pose a health risk to both pets and also to humans. So make sure you're using food safety practices, such as proper storage, the handling, and the cleaning practices that you would follow for yourself if you're handling raw food. And then a lot of times, especially when you're transitioning over to any type of diet, but especially a raw food diet, there can be a risk of overfeeding, but a lot of times underfeeding. So we need to find that right portion size, and it can sometimes be challenging, but play around with the amounts, looking at the body condition of your pet. If they're getting skinny, they're feeling more bony, and your body condition scoring them, we need to increase the amount of food that we're feeding. And vice versa. If they're like feeling a bit squishy and their body condition score is going higher, there's a lot of great body condition score resources for free on the internet where you can just search it and see like, okay, my pet should have a nice tummy tuck. They should have an hourglass shape. When I look at them from the top down, I should be able to just feel their ribs when I run my hands along their sides. So if you're starting to lose that beautiful figure, or they're feeling a little bit squishy or a little bit bony, we need to adjust the amounts that we're feeding to make sure that we're keeping them at an ideal body condition score. And then rapid transition without monitoring. If you're going to switch to a raw food diet, we need to be monitoring whether it's a rapid switch or a slow like transition, but especially if it's a rapid switch, because if they're getting blowout diarrhea and we're not watching their bathroom patterns and we're not picking up on that, they can get dehydrated. We can have electrolyte issues. They can get really sick. So we want to make sure that we are closely observing them and making sure that this is a successful and a safe transition to a raw food diet. And then neglecting dental health. Raw food diets are beneficial for dental health, but solely relying on them without adequate dental care can lead to dental problems. Just because we're feeding a raw food diet doesn't mean our pets will never need a dental cleaning. So there are a lot of great ways to safely clean the teeth and to prevent dental disease and prevent tartar buildup. So definitely check out there's some free resources. We have quite a few at the Natural Pet Doctor, but keep that in mind, just because, especially if we're feeding like a minced raw food diet, it's not going to have that hassle factor of your pet chewing on those bones. So it's not going to keep the teeth clean. So we still need to do the teeth brushing. We can use, the healthy toothpaste that we can make with coconut oil and other things in it. But we need to make sure that we aren't neglecting dental health when we transition to a raw food diet. And the last but not least common mistake that's made is overlooking quality sourcing. So if we're choosing low quality or contaminated ingredients, a lot of times those will be really cheap, or looking at what companies are we using, where are they sourcing their materials. We want to look for high quality human grade ingredients. We want to see human grade. Feed grade and human grade have different definitions, and we don't want feed grade. Feed grade is not fit for human consumption. So make sure where you're getting your meats, whether it's from a pet food company or whether it's from a farm, make sure that it is listed as human grade and sourced from reputable suppliers. So where should you start? So there's a lot of information, but here's the thing. Pick the method that feels the best for you based on your pet's current health and gut health status. So keeping that journal is really, really important. Knowing your pet, do they have any health conditions that are going on that, okay, yes, they can do the rapid transition, or no, I feel more comfortable with just doing that slow transition over 4 weeks. I'll monitor them closely, make sure that they're doing good and keeping them safe. We also want to use food safety techniques such as proper handling and storage of raw food. We need to keep everyone, including yourself, the humans, safe alongside with your pets. And then source that food appropriately. Once again, looking for human grade and looking at the reputation of the companies that you're using. Are they supplying pet food companies? Are they only using, is this a feed grade meat? Is it USDA sourced? Is it looking for all of those things is key. We want to use the best quality meats, and it doesn't mean that it has to break the bank. Going to farmers markets, going to local farmers if you can, and saying, okay, what can I buy from you to support them? And we're using, animals that are on pasture, that are, eating the proper foods for them. Those are all going to translate into foods that are rich in vitamins and minerals that are going to help our pets thrive. And then, of course, monitoring and keeping a journal. So this is going to include your pet's bowel movements, what do their stools look like, their appetite, and their energy. But most importantly, I want you to have fun with this. This can be the beginning of amazing health and energy and a lifetime of optimal health for your pets. When we can get them over to a less processed diet, especially a raw food diet, it can unlock true healing. It can unlock true optimal health for both your dogs and cats. And I've seen that with my own pets through my journey with learning about raw food throughout the years, helping my pets with cancer, helping my cats overcome GI issues, helping my clients and my patients overcome things like IBD, pancreatitis, allergies, autoimmune diseases, all sorts of chronic health issues because we changed their food to a less processed diet. So I hope you found that helpful and got some tips to take away with you to start your pets on their transition. If you want more information on optimizing their gut health through food and nutrition and raw food diets, definitely check out our website at thenaturalpetdoctor.com. If you need more information or you have questions, feel free to send us an email at info@thenaturalpetdoctor.com. You also find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and a YouTube channel where we post our videos each week. So definitely check that out. And I look forward to hearing how your pets do with transitioning over to a raw food diet. And here's some additional resources that you can refer back to with some great books that you can get for kind of helping you figure out the process and creating your own diets and making sure that you're doing it right. And some resources too, especially with those foodborne pathogens, to help create some ease and peace of mind for you too as you go through this process. Thanks again, everyone, for taking time today to learn a bit more, for wanting the best for your pets. I'm Dr. Katie Woodley, the Natural Pet Doctor. Take care.